The real benefit is we're able to build them roughly 5 to 10 times faster, and therefore about 5 to 10 times cheaper than kind of traditional code. So far to date, we've saved our clients about $1 million in app development costs based on what they've told us, based on their other estimates. Yeah.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.
All righty, welcome back to another episode of Business After Hours podcast. Here with my co-host Jared and our guest Than. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, what'd you say, Jared?
Oh, I said thanks for coming.
So, Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you up to your company, Drive Face Consulting?
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me. So Drive Face Consulting is a company I started about 3 years ago. It's all blending together now. We are what I refer to as a no-code development agency. So we build custom applications, web and mobile applications using exclusively no-code tools. So for those that aren't familiar, we don't write any code. We're using kind of visual programming. So platforms like Bubble.io, WeWeb, Xano. And the real benefit is we're able to build them roughly 5 to 10 times faster, and therefore about 5 to 10 times cheaper than kind of traditional code. So far to date, we've saved our clients about $1 million in app development costs based on what they've told us, based on their other estimates. Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So what led up to you starting this company?
So kind of the cool story is I don't have a coding background at all. But I'm technically savvy, I would say. But really what got me down this path is over the pandemic, I have a daughter, only child. She's the motivation for quite a bit. But during the pandemic, she, which was tough for her because she was the only child. So her one kind of really highlight of the day was the ice cream truck. And so she would, hear the ice cream truck, go crazy, run around, looking for money, and she couldn't go by herself. She had to wait for me. And so unfortunately, like 9 times out of 10, we'd miss the ice cream truck, right? And so as a dad, it just, breaks your heart. And so finally she said, "Hey, Dad, can we build an app to track the ice cream truck?" And so as someone with an entrepreneurial background and a girl dad, I was like, well, I can't say no, right? And so then I looked to see how much it would cost us to build it. And I was like, well, I love my daughter, but like that, just for something that kind of is something that was at the time thought was going to be fun. And so I took a boot camp on how to use Bubble.io, which is the first no-code platform I learned to use. $700, probably the best $700 I ever spent. So I built the app during that time, and eventually a version of it actually got licensed from a food truck coalition in Green Bay, and that was literally my 8-year-old daughter's idea. And so from there, I started building for myself, and then we started building for other people. And then now, I've got a team with me, and my wife actually has a technical background as well. So she's been working. So that's kind of how we got to today.
So can we track food or ice cream trucks?
So it's not the license ended up that they didn't renew. They had some change in leadership, but ultimately it did work. So basically there was one app for the food trucks, so they would share their location, and then another app for like consumers. And so then they could actually see the real-time location. And then we set up push notifications so that if you could like a specific food truck, and then you would get push notifications when they were within a certain like radius from you guys. So it was actually pretty cool.
Heck yeah, that is cool.
Yeah. And it built no code literally in like 100 hours.
Huh.
Yeah. Now, in layman's term for normal folks, what's the difference between code and no code?
So, at the end of the day, the end result is code in both cases. But really, it's I look at it as almost like a translator, right? Like so if you look at Wix or WordPress for websites, that's essentially what no-code apps is doing for applications, right? Okay. Whereas, in WordPress and Wix, it's primarily the visual components.
Yeah.
Now you add another layer of the workflows behind it, right?
Okay.
Where you're creating data, you're deleting data, you're powering kind of the back end workflows. And then a lot of applications are using what are called APIs, which is you don't need to know kind of what it stands for, but essentially it's, Google has an API for their stuff. And so a lot of times there's systems that do a very specific function, and then they kind of share that functionality through what's called an API. So with no code, it's really easy to integrate with those systems. So a lot of times, the magic is because all we're doing, it looks like I'm doing a lot, but all I'm doing is integrating with different APIs to run different functions. I'm either pulling data. So I just built I built an app a couple weeks ago. It's a social listening app where you can basically put in keywords and then pull in posts that have those keywords from Reddit, from Facebook, from LinkedIn. I didn't build that functionality. I used third-party APIs to do that. With no code, it makes it really easy to kind of do those integrations. And so basically the no code is, I'm able to kind of go in this back end and do drag and drop for different things that I want to do in my app. And so it just makes it so much faster. And obviously so much cheaper as a result. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Oh yeah. No, that's perfect.
What's the process for you to start building an app? Say, like I'm a client that has an idea. Like, can you take us through that process?
Yeah. So we've learned over the couple of years a better way to do it. So I'll walk you through kind of what we've learned and how to do it. And I think it's important because everyone has app ideas, and I think it's important to kind of know kind of best practices. So what I'll typically do is, someone says, hey, I'm interested. We'll sit down, do a kind of a discovery call, understand what they're doing. Number one is I'm trying to determine, hey, can we do this in no code? I would say 9 times out of 10, we can do it in no code. We actually haven't run into a situation that we haven't been able to do in no code. I'm sure at some point there'll be something that we run into that we say, hey, we can't quite do that in no code, but but like I said, 90% of the time we can. And then what we learned to do is we used to kind of, based on those conversations, we used to kind of scope out, okay, this is what the app should do. What we learned is once we started building, people were like, oh, I really want this instead. And like, it gets to be kind of a cluster, right? And so what we learned to do instead is we split the project up into kind of 2 phases. The first phase is what we call the user experience, user interface stage, where we're building out what we call wireframes, right? So wireframes are basically, it's essentially graphic design of all the major screens of an app, right? Okay. And so what that does is by going through that process, it forces the project owner to really think through, okay, on this screen, what are the buttons do I want? What are the fields I want to collect? Okay, once we figure that out, when I click this button, what do I want to see? And so what we found is by doing the wireframes before we scoped out the final app, we were able to get a much more accurate idea of, okay, what does this app actually do? And then we can take that wireframe and more accurately scope, okay, what's the cost of that? And then from there, we'll, once we do the wireframes, then we'll do a scope or estimate of what the actual app would cost to build. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when you say that you've saved companies over $1 million so far, how is what you do save money?
Like I said, so really, by not having the right code, it really speeds up the process, right? Because, instead of, a lot of times what we're doing is we're using pre-built elements. If you look at most kind of business applications, you're looking at creating data, reading data, manipulating data, displaying data, right? And so in that, you can have kind of pre-built workflows to do those functions, right? So instead of having to write code for each of those things, now I can basically do drag and drop for, okay, I want to create this, and then tell it, okay, this is what I want to put in that new, field, right? And so what we find is by not having to write code, now AI is changing this a little bit, but by not having to write code, it's usually about 5 to 10 times faster than writing code for that same functionality.
Okay. Wow. So it saves a lot of man hours essentially.
Oh, that's where the cost savings come from 100%. What I'll also tell you is when you build an app, number one is there's always going to be bugs when you do custom. Number two is people are always going to use it differently than you expect them to, right? And so when they start using it, you're going to get feedback, and then obviously you're going to make changes to the app. that's where no code really, I've seen no code really shine, because the speed at which we're able to take that feedback and then incorporate it into the app is just lightning quick. I mean, I've been in calls with clients where they said, hey, we want this to happen. I'll literally be on the call, do it. I'm like, hey, refresh it and try it now. And like, it'll be literally 5 or 10 minutes, versus a lot of times something like that would take, 5, 10, a couple weeks in some cases, right? And so just the speed at which you're able to do that is so much quicker. The other thing is, we've seen a lot of times when you do code, you're needing large teams to build the app.
Yep.
In most cases, we have one person build the whole app, and so it just kind of cleans up kind of the process a little bit. And the last thing I'll mention real quick is, I think the other thing that I've seen a lot is people that have tried, developers in India and things like that, offshore. One of the biggest complaints I hear a lot is, well, they didn't really understand what we were trying to build, right? And so a lot of times with code, the people that are building are so far away from the people that are using. There's just a big disconnect now. And now with no code, you've got people that are users that can pick it up and become builders, right? And so now you've got the users being able to build, and I think that leads to a better outcome as well. That makes sense.
Now, would there be a reason why someone would want to do an app over like a website?
So let me when you say app, I'm assuming you mean like a mobile app, correct?
Yeah, I'm assuming so.
Yeah. Okay. So and just to be clear, when I say app, I'm referring to both a web-based app or a mobile app.
Okay.
But to answer your question, that's a good question. So a lot of times people go straight to a mobile app when they don't need to. Some of the reasons why you might want to do a mobile app is it can reduce friction, in the sense that, like, now they just have an icon on their phone, they can press it. Maybe they don't have to log in every time. It can have, it can run in the background, right? Versus a website can't. Some of the other kind of features where it's like, if this is a big part of your functionality, I would say maybe a mobile app makes sense. So push notifications is one, right? So push notifications is going to be, you can't really do in a web-based app. And then location tracking is probably another one where, if you do web-based, it doesn't track in the background, right? So versus a mobile app, you can set it to actually track your location in the background. So, but other than that, like, mobile responsive websites are probably just as good in a lot of cases. And what you find is, you've probably seen the same thing, is like, people are burnt out from apps, right? And so they don't necessarily want to download another app. And so sometimes a website makes more sense, right? So it really just depends on the use case. And so there's no kind of right or wrong answer.
Are there companies out there that you would probably strongly suggest not getting a mobile app?
So there was one, and I can't share all the specifics, right? But it was a healthcare related thing. Basically where they wanted to get an opinion from a doctor, right? And in that case, he was saying, oh, let's do a mobile app. But it was like, really, you're only going to use that once, right? And so, it doesn't make sense to make someone download an app to do one thing once, right? Gotcha. And so I was like, you know what? It's probably going to make more sense to just do it as a web. And he's like, you know what? You're right. And so, so I think it's something like that, where if it's not like something where you need more consistent engagement, then it might not make sense to make them download a whole app to use once or twice, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, just in case there's businesses out there that are thinking, man, we could use an app, and then there's going to be you that might encourage against it, save them some money and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, let me be clear. So I'm talking about a web-based app, which we do as well. So we could still do a web-based app, but if you're referring to a mobile app, that's what I would tell them.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah. So then, how large have you gotten this taken off to?
So right now, as far as internal, it's myself and my wife. And my wife has a pretty strong background. She used to do product management for some of the largest banks in the world, and also ultimately for a contractor that was working on the VA hospital app, right? So she's actually got quite a bit of experience, but on the coded side. So really, it's just her and I, but we have a team of, like half a dozen to a dozen contractors or freelancers, both on the UI UX design as well as actual developers. And then we also have folks dedicated to doing the QA. So like testing the app to make sure everything's working the way it should.
No, that's good.
Yeah. I've learned over the years, like, especially in an agency model, like having salary really kind of keeps you from being able to scale up quickly, but also at the same time, when things change, being able to scale down quickly, and really both are important, right? And it's just, I've just had situations where it's just like, oh crap, now you're like trying to find work just to keep people, on payroll, and it's just like I've learned that, like, it's just, the economy just changes so quickly that you as nimble as you possibly can, but still be able to deliver a good product is kind of where you want to
be. And how? Go ahead, Jared.
I was just gonna. So what's been your struggle lately?
Well, so we're in a little bit of a transition. So in the first few years, we did a lot of really small businesses. So one of the first things I did to kind of get initial business was join BNI, if you're familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that got us off the ground. But we got a lot of, BNI is great for local small businesses, like kind of home services. Mm-hmm. And what we learned from that was, and we built a great portfolio from that, so I don't want to downplay it, but we encountered a lot of small businesses that, number one, didn't really truly understand the value. The one didn't understand the technology to begin with, and then as a result didn't understand the value of it. And so we found ourselves undercharging for stuff and then getting nickel and dimed over undercharging for stuff, and then, they wanted changes, and it's like, they expected kind of all those things to be free. And so, it was kind of, it was through an acquaintance of mine where we did, they're in the risk management space. They had got an estimate for an app to do for about 500,000, right? We ended up doing it. We just finished up. They're thrilled with it. We ended up doing for just under 40K.
Wow.
They are thrilled with it, and we were thrilled with how much we're getting on that. And it just was an eye opener to us as far as like, okay, and it's going to be ongoing work as well. And so it just made us realize, like, hey, this is where we want to be, because in a lot of cases we were probably losing money on some of those smaller projects, right? And so we're really learning to turn away projects now, which is kind of unheard of in the first year or so, and then really just trying to find projects that really kind of meet that kind of bigger threshold.
So when you were smaller, going in BNI, and at what point did you come to that conclusion, like, okay, we got to get into bigger companies instead of these small?
It was about 2 years into BNI, and it really was that larger project that we did that was like, okay, like, we're doing the same amount of work and we're making like 10 times as much. Yeah, 10 times as much, and the client is thrilled, right? And it helps when they get another estimate for $500,000, and it's like, no, we can do it for 40. It's like, yeah, it's really easy to make it, but again, it's now someone like that understands the value of what we're doing, right?
Right.
And so I think that's really the biggest difference.
What's been your biggest clue, I guess, when prospecting or putting your name out there? How do you find the people that you see will have the value in your business?
Well, so one of the things that we're trying to do, and I've been trying to do, like, when you get started, you're throwing spaghetti against the wall. It's a little bit of a shotgun approach, right? And so any industry that said yes, we'd be like, yeah, we'll do it. And so I think what we're doing now is there's two industries that we're seeing that have some complexities to it that, also as a result kind of demand a little bit higher, price tag. And what actually works out well is it's actually two industries that my wife has experience with as well, are healthcare and financial services.
Okay.
And by default, those industries tend to be willing to pay a little bit more as well. And again, we're still crushing whatever else it would cost, any other essence they would get, but we're making a lot more than we would on those other projects. So those are kind of two industries that we're starting to focus in a little bit more on. So
okay.
Yeah.
So you just niche down to pretty much healthcare and financials.
Yeah, there might be some other ones that we're doing, but like a lot of the stuff in our pipeline right now kind of falls into those two buckets.
Okay. Is it something that you enjoy better just because you guys are familiar with it, or is it just business take you there?
I think the business took us there.
Okay.
I wouldn't have, if you told me a year or two ago, I'm not sure I would have started there. Now, I will say, in addition to that, one of the weaknesses in the past for no code has been HIPAA compliance, which is a requirement for a lot of healthcare apps. And so we did find a tech stack that's fairly new that is HIPAA compliant. And I actually just built an app just to kind of really get myself kind of really familiar with it. And so it kind of aligns with it. It's an app stack that I really like. It's more secure, it's more scalable, and so it fits into. And we actually used part of it for the risk management project we just did. And so I think that also kind of took us in this direction too, where like all these pieces of the puzzle kind of fit. Where it's like, here's a tech stack that we really like. It kind of fits into the needs of these industries, and so and then like I said, we're finding projects where it's just they're better projects from a financial standpoint. So I think it's kind of a lot of pieces falling into place, if that makes sense.
Sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
When you say healthcare, are you talking like smaller practices or like larger like healthcare facilities?
So right now it's been kind of like smaller healthcare startups. I've had a couple conversations with like smaller practices. One of the things that we are going to try and to get into is like larger enterprise, but I think larger enterprise kind of has this notion that they might be too big for no code, which is actually not true. I mean, there's actually some case studies there's actually one case study when I went to a conference where it was a huge company that went from code to no code, saved $2.3 million a year by getting rid of their outsourced tech team. And then what happened is they actually taught their product team to use Bubble. And so two things there. One, you save the money. Two is the people that know the product best are the ones building. And so they actually cut their timelines from about 15 months for launch down to like 3 to 4, in addition to saving the 2.3. So I think hopefully like enterprise will be more open to it, but I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we'll run into in enterprise. But yeah, so to answer your question, it's been kind of like more healthcare startups, like app startups and things like that we're trying to work with.
Have you found it easier now that you have niched down? Like, is it just like more smooth? Like when they come to you, like a hospital or even a financial institution comes to you, kind of know the ins and outs now?
Yeah, I think it's that, right? I think just learning kind of the ins and outs, like you said. It's also kind of having the strength of the case study. Like some of the first times, like I tried to approach healthcare, they're like, "Hey, can you send me some sample work?" And it's like I sent him some stuff. He's like, "Well, you sent me a bunch of projects, none of which are related to healthcare." And I was like, "Well, that's what we got right now." So it is a little bit like it starts to support itself, right? Like I think that's kind of where you're going with it. Like it is starting to get easier. You start to understand the pain points more. So when you approach someone in that industry, you kind of know, okay, these are the things that they're really facing and struggling with. So I think your pitch gets a little bit tighter.
Sure.
And I think you just become more efficient, right? Because you're gearing your processes and things like that towards something you're doing over and over again. So,
right.
But yeah, so I mean, I think that's why you want to niche down. I think it's one of those things where initially it's like, well, okay, great, I know you need to niche down, but like, where do I start, right? Like, and so, and you don't want to, you kind of want to hedge your bets a little bit and kind of see where it takes you. So I kind of started broad with the intention of niching down. It's just for the first 2 or 3 years, it was like there was no clear niche that was showing up, and I think really just over the last year or so, we started to see things that start to make sense, like both financially and just kind of with the tech stacks that we were working with.
And what's your future look like?
Good. I mean, really, we had a rough last year. I think we were really kind of trying to figure out who we are, what we were doing. And then we really made some decisions. Like we used to do some lead generation stuff. We used to do a lot of stuff. We got pulled in a lot of different directions. It was kind of like, whoever would pay us money, we would take it from them,
Right.
And I think we saw that most of our revenue was coming from no code apps. So I think that was number one. Number two is we kind of figured out some lead generation stuff. And then number three, we really started to kind of find some of these niches. And so in the last probably quarter, really November, December last year, we made a lot of progress from a pipeline standpoint. We didn't necessarily close a lot of it, and it just was end of year stuff. But to start the year, stuff has really started to close. And so I think, a lot of the work that we did in November, December, I think we're starting to see the results of now.
That's good.
So, yeah.
That's good. Well, as we wrap up here, Sam, why don't you give yourself your own little infomercial here and highlight your company?
Yeah. I mean, so I would say that what we find is a lot of people just don't know what no code is. Hopefully after today, you'll find that a lot of companies can benefit from no code, right? And so I think it really is just about educating yourself. And I think, just from our standpoint, what I'll share about the unique value proposition from us is a couple things. Number one is, you've got a lot of experience, from my wife with her product management experience. I myself have had a lot of startups over the last 20 years. And so I'm also actually a mentor at the Founders Institute Accelerator Program. So you're not just getting an app development firm, you're really getting someone that is a consultant, right? And helping them. And we actually turned a project down a couple of months ago where it's just like, I don't think this will work. Like, I just don't think this will work. And it was like a $15,000 project. And my wife and I both said, like, listen, we're not going to. So I think you're going to get someone that is just not going to just try and take your money, but is actually trying to help you. I tell people all the time, like, every project I do, I do it as if we're spending our own money, right? And so I think that's really kind of the benefit of working with us, and obviously being U.S. based as well. But yeah, no, I'm we always start with a free consultation. We're happy to talk to anyone, and what you'll get from us is what there's been cases where I've told people, like, I don't think you're ready to build an app yet. Like, sure. I think you'll get that from us. So I would say that's really the benefit of working with us.
Awesome. That's great. Jared, you got anything?
No, thanks for coming on, Zen. It was a pleasure having you. You provided some info for me for sure, who has zero knowledge of this. So thanks for that.
No, really awesome. Like I said, I come from an education background, so really it's just about education, and I appreciate you having me. I enjoy the conversation.
Absolutely, same here, and best of luck to you. Look forward to seeing where this company takes you.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. Me too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.